Today's episode of the What's That Like podcast is brought to you by Opera House Brewing Company, Hillsboro, Illinois. Hashtag drink local.
What's that like?
What's going on, people? Hey, it's another edition of the What's That Like podcast, and I'm your host, John Knowles. Second to last episode of the season, second to last episode of the decade. We've got a good one for you. It's got some local impact on it. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Coffeen Power Plant and its closing, and it's going to be the human side of the story, a little bit of the business side. We've got a special guest, a friend of mine, Don Nowell. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a second, but I think you're going to enjoy it. As you heard at the top, today's episode brought to you by the Opera House Brewing Company. Got to thank those folks so much right there in Hillsboro, Illinois. Sponsor of the show. Great folks. Things that are going on there. They made this new ale, Hardcore Hammer and Ale for Hardcore Hammers in a partnership. They sold the sucker out like a weekend. I mean, Tony, it must be the brewmaster extraordinaire. I mean, he's just got a lot of stuff that he's doing over there. It's awesome. They've got a Christmas brew coming. I think you're going to enjoy that this month. If you've got friends in town, it's the holidays, you want to go spend some time. It's just a nice place. You can get a nice glass of bourbon. They'll make you an old-fashioned. Jennifer will make you something that's awesome. Get in there. Get into the Opera House. Meet some friends. Tell them the What's That Like podcast sent you. It's awesome. Don't hesitate to spend some time over there at the Opera House. Thank you, Tony and Jennifer. What's coming up? The end of the decade show is coming. So this is the second to last episode. The last episode of the year we're planning on just kind of wrapping up the decade in Central Illinois. What was it like to live here for the last 10 years? What are the news, the sports teams, the sports people, the events that have happened? Whatever. I mean, think about you live here. What things in this area have had the biggest impact on you, or you think has made the biggest impact in Central Illinois? What was that like? Send me a message. Get on Facebook. Get on Twitter. Send me a message. Let me know what it was. You don't have to give me the whole story. Just remind me about it. I just had somebody go, you know what? Football numbers have been declining. That's a topic to talk about. You know, we've had great football success. Rochester's won like 7 titles. The Cavaliers have been close. The Dogs got close from Staunton. You know, just those things to tell. Think about the Coliseum. We had that on the show. That burned in the last 10 years. Big impact. All kinds of things. Just give me a note. Shoot me a note. Just say, hey, Johnny, don't forget about X. And let me know. It's out there on Facebook page. What's That Like Podcast on Facebook. At What's That Like Podcast on Twitter. You'll find us out there. Shoot me a note. Shoot me an instant message. Let me know. If you can. Also, while you're listening, you can do it right now. If you got it on your phone, you're listening, just scroll down. Rate and review the show, especially on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. If you're on the other services, do that as well. Helps us out. We love to see new reviews. We love to see that all. It really helps generate good buzz for the show, particularly with some of the services that we have. Okay, let's get to the topic of the day. I said at the top, this is about the Coffeen Power Plant. We're going to be talking to Don Nowell. Don was an employee at the place. Don is not a spokesman for the power plant. He's not a spokesman for the union. He's not a spokesman for the company that owned it. He was a guy that worked there. He's also one of my best friends. And we were talking, I'm like, let's just tell the story of what that was. Let people know more than just 4 or 5 paragraphs they read in a newspaper or saw on Facebook or read through some comments. Let's have a discussion about what the place was. We'll talk about what it was like to work there. What's it like to make power? How is power generated? What were the factors, in his opinion, that kind of led to the demise, so to speak, of the Coffeen Power Plant? It's just truly a shame, you know, that after almost 55 years of production and, you know, being a beacon to Central Illinois, both visually and from an employment and a tax benefit and all that stuff, that it's no longer here. It's sad. It's a sad tale. And I know a lot of you out there, you all knew somebody that knew somebody or somebody that worked there. When you would get up on a cold morning and you had heat in your house, you knew you had guys like Don and his fellow employees over there to thank, because they kept the lights burning right here in Central Illinois for the last 55 years. Not that we don't have power today in other ways, but it was nice knowing we had it literally, locally produced. We're going to talk about it. Let's get right to it. Don, now, employee of the Coffeen Power Plant. You worked there for over 10 years. What was that like? Don, now, how you doing, buddy?
Just fine this crisp Saturday morning.
It is a crisp Saturday morning. And a little background on you and me. I mean, we're going to talk about the topic of the day is the closing of the Coffeen Power Plant. And you worked there for how long?
12 years.
Well, I don't want to paint you out to be something you don't want to be painted out to be either. You were not like the administrator of the place. You worked there. You were just one of the guys.
Yeah, worked. Started there in the utility department, labor gang, and bid up through the operations department to control room operator, which is what I was when it closed.
Yeah. What this is about is we're just going to talk about it. It's obviously the Coffeen Power Plant closing in this area of Central Illinois. It's big news. It's been there for years. We'll get into when it was built and everything then as time goes by. But really what we're just here to talk about is kind of what it was like. Obviously, that's the title of the show. You worked there for a number of years, what it was like to be a power plant operator, what it's like to work in a power plant. What does a power plant do? How does it work? People just think, well, some smoke comes out of a smokestack and the lights turn on in their house. We want to kind of bridge some of that gap together as well and how that works. But the other part of the background is just so, I think a lot of you that if you know me, you probably know Don. We're like best buddies. We have been forever. You're the godfather of my kids.
Godfather. Yeah, we've done a lot of things through the years together, John.
Our wives were best pals growing up, and therefore we're best pals. Like I say, you're godfather. How many kids are you the godfather to? You got enough fingers and toes to count that?
Oh, yeah. Six.
Six?
I'd say, yeah.
Yeah. See, that's what people think of you. You're a quality guy.
Sure.
You're also the fire chief here in Mount Olive. We've been serving there together. You just hit your 30th anniversary.
30 years serving the Mount Olive Fire Protection District Volunteer Fire Department.
Can you believe that? Does it seem like it?
No, not really. I mean, you look back over 30 years, there's been a lot of changes through the years, and I'm fortunate to serve with great quality people throughout all of my time there.
10 years ago, literally almost 10 years ago this month, you came over here and handed me an application and said, hey, dude, you need to do this.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
20 years ago, yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't cut yourself
Yeah,
short.
20 years ago. I'll be 20 in January, so I'll never catch you. You'll always have 10 years on me.
Yeah, maybe.
But not the topic of the day. That's maybe a topic for another show, but let's get into the power plant. You said you got there. What year was it?
I went there in 2008.
Yeah, and what did you do before that?
I was a machinist for Owens, Illinois, and Godfrey, and until that plant shut down. Then I did a stint over in Beneld for VCAM, machining family, little family shop. A lot of fun there. But the power plant always had, I was always kind of intrigued by the power plant. I could see the stack from Bunker Hill whenever I was coming home from Godfrey, and I always thought that might be a pretty neat place to work someday. And then whenever the Godfrey plant shut down, I had an opportunity to pursue that.
I'm glad you said that you could see that stack almost from Bunker Hill, which is probably, 35 miles? Probably?
Oh, yeah, probably as the crow flies. Yeah, sure.
But when you say that, I will tell you this. When I was a little kid, I grew up in Staunton. You're trying to figure out what directions are. Somebody's trying to tell you, hey, that's north, east, west, south. I knew what east was because of that power plant. It's like if I was out somewhere and you could see that power plant, you knew, and you could see it. The stack goes up in the air, the smoke would be rolling. I knew that was east. Therefore, I knew what was north, south, and west. So it was a bearing and it was a marker. And I bet for a lot of folks in this area, it was for them as well. Because it was a beacon there. The light would be either flashing or you'd see smoke coming out of it for miles and miles around. And it's interesting that you say that because you always wanted to work there. What drew you to that?
Just the energy infrastructure industry itself. You know, it was just something that sounded pretty neat. And a lot of people are intrigued by machines, and that's what this power plant is. It's a whole bunch of machines coming together to make one great big machine.
Yeah. Let's go back and talk about the power plant itself. What year was that constructed?
There's 2 units there, and I believe like Unit 1 was the first unit online. It was around 1965, I think, maybe completed or started. But
Was the lake created for the power plant, or was the power plant created near the lake?
no, the lake was part of the construction. They have to have the lake for cooling water and condensing.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Coal, you don't burn coal and it makes electricity. The coal is just the start of the process. So tell our listeners, if they don't know, what it's like to make electricity. How does that actually work?
Burn the coal to create heat.
Okay.
Heat heats the water turns to steam. Steam spins a turbine, goes through turbine blades and spins a turbine, which is hooked up to a generator, which spins and creates electricity.
So coal comes in, burns, steam through the pipe, spins it. It's just another way to get that turbine spinning, like Hoover Dam.
Yeah, Hoover.
You and I actually been there.
Yeah.
And Hoover Dam, it's just falling water going through the turbine that creates it. Therefore, that's how it's created. Here, it's created by coal burning. So it's a coal-fired plant, which is important to this part of the story in the long run. And it was built, you said, or started, whatever. It's out there. Go look. 65-ish.
Yeah, Unit 1.
Yeah, it was Unit 1. And Unit 2 came on when?
72-ish.
So really soon thereafter, they expanded the place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think they had that in the works to begin with.
Yeah. And that was really at a time, I'm thinking in the mid 60s. I mean, we had coal here, but there is nuclear in Illinois, right?
Oh, yeah. Illinois has a high number of nuclear power plants. Probably, I don't know the figures, but it's at least in the top 3 or 5 in the states that have nuclear power plants.
Illinois, well, how big of a producer was it nationally of electricity? I mean, were we one of the leaders in that, or as time gone by, has that shifted?
Well, they say that Illinois is a net exporter of electricity. I mean, I don't have the figures, but...
well, close enough.
Yeah.
We produced a lot of power here.
Mm-hmm.
As time went by, obviously, the coal industry goes up and down, price of coal goes up and down, therefore price of electricity goes up and down, and how it's generated and the cost per, how do you say it? Cost per kW kilowatt? What was that?
No, we measure it in megawatt. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of factors that influence coal use in the power generation industry. And like you said, the price of coal, but also the price of the other means of generating electricity. Natural gas up and down. Right now we've got a glut of natural gas, so natural gas prices are historically low. That puts a lot of pressure on other forms
because it's easier to use that to generate the same megawatt.
It's more economical.
Yeah. How big of a generator was Coffeen?
Coffeen, both units, Unit 1 was like 365 megawatts gross, and Unit 2 is 625 gross.
And put that on a scale. Is that a lot? I mean, compared to other places?
It's a large producer.
Okay.
Back in the day, it would be considered a base load power plant.
Day-to-day usage. I mean, when I plug something into my house here, I get 110 volts. There's 220 volts in 2 phases coming to my house. You're putting power out there onto the grid. What does that mean? I mean, it's not stored somewhere. It's on demand all the time. How does that work?
Hey, you're getting into a lot of the magic part of
That's what I want to know. That's what we want to know. That's what I don't understand.
Yeah. So our generators are producing electricity at like 22,000 kilovolts, but it goes through a step-up transformer right outside the plant, and it steps it up to 365,000 volts and puts it out into the grid, and wherever it goes from there, that's beyond us. That goes into the transmission and distribution side of things, and that was not part of the power plant. dispatch and the load centers would send signals to our units, and it would actually drive how much we were producing. So they kind of forecast out, and we deliver what they need.
So if it's August and it's 105 degrees outside, you're producing more than on a nice May day at 65 because of the demand.
Yeah.
And there's a control center somewhere else that's in charge of your power plant and everybody else's that's saying, hey, tell Coffeen, essentially turn the heat up. We need to make more megawatts.
Yeah. Through the grid, I guess is what it'd be called. There's regional transmission owners, and they do auctions and buy and sell power all the time, I guess. And really that's what, if they're offering more money, then more people are apt to produce more power.
Which gets down to the heart of the whole thing. Power, electricity, it's a commodity. Mm-hmm. And it's traded. Price per megawatt, kilowatt, whatever is out there in the marketplace. And if people want to sometimes manipulate it, I know that's happened in the past, Enron, right? Where things that from a market perspective, they're trying to shut generators down, create a shortage. This was the whole California thing. What was that, 10, 12, 15 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I think they're still feeling the effects of that.
That was deregulation, as I think they called that, right?
Yeah, Illinois followed their suit.
Yeah. You mentioned Illinois is a net exporter. Is it anymore? Or is it still, or is it just on the decline?
No, they're saying Illinois exports more power than what we use. I don't know if that's always been the case. You lose your large industrial customers that really used a bunch of electricity, and, things start changing. Your demand drops.
Oh, so what you're kind of getting at is the industrial complex of Illinois lost a lot of manufacturing. Therefore, you were supporting a greater percentage of residential as opposed to large power users in the industrial complex.
Yeah, that's what I see. They're the big drivers of electricity usage, but also, the energy efficiency factors come into play, even down to the efficiency of your air conditioner to LED light bulbs.
Tell me, as time has gone by, what was it like? You said you started in utilities. Tell me about how big the plant is. People that are listening to this, we've covered what electricity is and how it works. Tell me about the Coffeen plant.
Well, it was hot, noisy, and dirty.
Yeah.
But and it was, because you had all this machinery running, and it was noisy. You were there. There wasn't much going on that day, so it was kind of quiet.
It was pretty much quiet.
At first, it's so huge, you're walking around, you're lost, you don't know where in the heck you're at.
Yeah.
Get up on, 9 floors up, which is really like each floor maybe worth 3 stories. And then the grounds itself, you look at it and you look at the building and you think, oh, that's a big building from Route 185. You get up in the parking lot and look at it, and you're like, oh, that is a big building. But the grounds also, they owned a lot of ground all around the lake. Well, they built the lake for the power plant. That's like 1,100 acre lake. At the beginning, or somewhere in there was a coal mine that was right there also, which directly fed the power plant.
Okay.
So it was they call it a mine mouth operation. That was gone probably. The mine shut down maybe in the 80s, sometime mid 80s. And they started getting train.
So
coal.
It was fed by rail.
Yeah, after that, yeah.
And then when I was there with you, I think I probably have a picture of it. We'll post it with the stuff on Facebook. You basically had how many acre field that you just stored the coal in, right?
Oh, yeah. Heck, I don't know. What do you think? That'd be about 40 acres. 60.
It was well more than how many football fields. The way it looked, yeah. And then that was all just fed into like a big tower, right?
Yeah. So the trains would bring the coal in, and then belt 1, 2, 3 belts up to the lowering well, which is like that big cone you typically see a picture of.
Uh-huh.
So underneath that cone is more feeders underground in the tunnels, and ours brought it up from that cone underground into a crusher house, which prepared the coal for burning. We just smashed ours down to, pea size or so, and that's how our boilers burn the coal.
And then so the coal's burning, it's heating the water, the steam's then moving over to the generators, which is in the big 9-story building, and all that was underneath one kind of big square box, right?
Yeah, rectangle if you stood it up.
Yeah.
But yeah. We bring the coal in and then feed it through to the burners. We have this Coffeen is cyclone burners. Burns all the coal there, and the heat goes out into the firebox. The boiler water, just pure clean water, cleaned of all the impurities, so that eventually when it's hitting these turbine blades at 3,600 RPM, it's not pitting them and causing a bunch of issues with us. So it's pure water, and it, of course, it starts out as water, goes through different areas of the boiler, and it just keeps getting hotter and hotter, and we keep putting pressure and pressure on it. As water is under more pressure, it takes more heat to make steam. Eventually, the steam's coming out basically dry steam, superheated steam, 1,005 degrees, 2,400 pounds per square inch of steam. And that's what's going through the control valves and turning the turbine.
And that's what's really at the source of everything. It's that hot water, which is why the lake's there, which is returned to the lake. And we'll cover that in a second. Local fishermen love the place because they could fish almost all year because the lake was always a little bit warmer. Coffeen had a reputation of being one of the cleanest, if not the cleanest, coal fire plant in the state, right?
Oh yeah, in the world there for a few.
Wow. Okay.
For a few years, but that was through the SO2 emissions is where it was really the cleanest, and that was because of the scrubbers. The new stack came up and big vessels on either side of it, which was a wet flue gas desulfurization unit, is what it was, WFGD, and it cleaned up the SO2 emissions. So we were the lowest sulfur dioxide emitter in the world for some say the universe for a few years there, and then we're still right up there. There was maybe one or two new ones that came up that were maybe just a little bit cleaner. I don't know.
And those are the big stacks you see, and there's two of them, right? And how tall were they?
Well, you see the big concrete stack with the LED lights on it. What's that? Maybe 600 feet? I don't know for sure. I think so. Plant's about 300 feet, and I think the stack's about 600. But it's way up.
It's like the arch. It's big. You can see it from a long way. And when the steam or the smoke or the release was coming out of it, certainly you could really see it, especially on a cool, crisp morning like today.
Well, what you're seeing is the humidity coming out of there, moisture, water vapor. What we're doing is that flue gas is going through this process, and it's being treated by sprays into the hot flue gas, which creates steam.
Yeah.
I think I remember, early in whenever I first started, that wasn't going when I first got there. It was almost complete, but they were calculating that the loss in water vapor through the new stack was going to be about a 32nd of an inch a day off of the lake, the entire surface of the lake.
Really?
Yeah.
A 32nd of an inch off the surface of the lake, which that's not even a fingernail?
Yeah. But the lake is so important, they made accommodations to try to help keep the lake full during drier periods.
Sure. Yeah. And that warm water, that was really, so when warm water goes back in, it's cooled in stages. You're not putting back this superheated water into the lake, right?
The boiler water is a closed loop system. So we're heating up water, makes steam, drying out the steam, turning the turbine. When it goes through the turbine, it's condensed and made back into water, which we just keep pumping around and around. So in the condenser, that's what's heating up the lake.
Okay.
The water we use from the lake goes through our condenser, which is cooler than the boiler water, so it cools the steam down back into water. The cooling medium is returned back to the lake.
Gotcha. And that's like what we talked about a second ago. That's why local fishermen, duck hunters, they loved Coffeen Lake for all this time because, when other lakes were freezing, the water temperature, whether it was warmer, you could fish later in the year, you could fish all year. It never really froze. The whole lake never really froze over.
Oh, no, they had, I'd be driving around out there sometimes when I was working the outside job, and it'd be just cold as heck in the middle of winter, and there might be a bass tournament going on. Guys like fishing.
They do. So here we've got this plant. You said it's average load, making good power. It's one of the cleanest in the universe, definitely the state, probably the world, as you said before. What changed? Why all of a sudden did, politics or whatever get in the way here that on August 21st of this year, there's an announcement that says they're going to close Coffeen Power Plant. Were you shocked about that?
Being there, we kind of saw things happening. Never knew for sure never dreamed that the whole plant would be shut down, but we kind of figured that at least, unit 1, small unit or something would have been closed down. But there was a number of factors that led up to it. We talked about the scrubber and all that, to make it the cleanest in the world, the best engineering practices available. And that all took place over a 10-year period. There was other things that they did to the plant to bring it into compliance with, modern day emissions rules and what have you. I think from what I understand, the first decade of this new century, 2000 to 2010.
Yeah, the aughts.
Yeah, the aughts. Ameren owned it at the time. I think they put about $900 million into that plant in that time period just to bring it up to pollution standards. There was new rules coming in Illinois. We talked about that a little bit about Illinois deregulating, and then there's also the EPA and Pollution Control Board side of things that make the rules for how you're going to conduct business in Illinois. And back then they made the rule that, hey, if you want to produce power in Illinois, you got to have some type of scrubber system to reduce sulfur dioxide. So they did. Well, you fast forward 10 years, 12 years, the rules changed because different forces in the market made it maybe not so economical. The rest of the plants didn't comply yet. We were grouped in, there's a whole lot of moving parts to this.
Well, I think what you're coming down to is it ends up being clean versus cost.
Yeah.
And your plant being one of the cleanest may have been maybe one of the more expensive ones to produce power. Is that true? No?
I don't have the figures, but it added a little bit of cost, but probably not that much. In the end, they got the rule changed to separate our plants, and in a nutshell, Coffeen wasn't needed to make pollution credits for every other plant. But like I said, there was other market forces, cheap natural gas, tax incentives for wind and solar, wherever that's going to go. But it just became not so economical. I don't have the figures.
And like I said, you're not the spokesman here. You were a guy in the control room. And we're very clear about that. You were not a spokesman for Vistra Energy. It was Vistra, right?
Yeah. At the time, they merged with Dynegy,
and they decided we don't need this power from this plant. We can get it in other places under whatever rules and environmental rules, and you guys just found yourselves on the outside of that looking in.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell. What happens to that place now? How many acres of property, massive building, these massive stacks? Is it all just going to just stand there and waste away in place? What do you know what's going to happen there? Has that even been decided?
I don't know. If it's been decided, it hasn't been shared with us. They're waiting on their options through the state, legislature and what have you. Vistra is trying to get into the battery storage so they can store power, like what we talked about. What we did was on demand.
Right.
Well, with solar or wind, you can't do on demand because when people need lights, the sun's not shining.
Right.
So they can't produce it that way. So what the technology they're all trying to develop is a massive utility scale, I think is the term, battery storage capacity. So I don't know if they'll ever get that far over there. The plant at Wood River, it stood for how many years? They finally started tearing it down now. Sold it to another developer. Eventually, it'll probably be down. Right now, we secured it before we left, de-energized just about everything we could. Give you an example, the lights on the stack. We had to keep a little juice flowing through the plant to power that up until they get alternative power ran to
Somebody's got to run an extension cord over there just to power the LEDs is what you're saying almost. Yeah. That's it. So that's kind of the story. It was constructed. It had a 55 almost year run. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll back up a little bit. It was constructed by Central Illinois Public Service, CIPS. And then 90s sold to Ameren.
Yeah.
Ameren, yeah. And then Ameren sold it to, however you want to put that. There's a lot of information on that deal, too. Sold it to Dynegy, which already had generation plants in Illinois. Now, here a couple of years ago, Vistra and Dynegy came together as one company. They were both Texas companies.
So when Vistra and Dynegy then decide, all right, this is it for Coffeen. August 21st, they announced that. Talk to me about just your perspective, your coworkers' perspective. What did that mean to you? And I think you had, about 90 employees there. How did y'all take that? What did that feel like?
Oh, okay. So we kind of had an idea that something was coming, for maybe better than a year, maybe two.
The leaves were blowing in that direction. You kind of knew. Yeah. Something
was going to change, in Illinois. Whether it was going to be our plant or not, we didn't know for sure. A lot of speculation was that at least one of the units would be shut down, if not the whole plant. And that's what happened. I mean, it's, a punch in the gut. I've been through it before. It doesn't make it any easier, over that course of time. You develop, good friendships and meet new people and have a lot of fun, with your coworkers.
And you were there for how long? And you worked what? Donnie, you were always working. You were doing 12s and 16s. You spent a lot more time with some of these people than you did your own family. I'll say unfortunately, but, for your family. But at the end of the day, that's how close you were. You spent so much time with these folks. And that's got to be one of the toughest parts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We, everybody there was dedicated to putting the product out and keeping, lights on in Central Illinois and beyond. But you're right. We probably spent a lot more waking hours with each other than our family sometimes. Yeah, the amount of overtime, amount of work that was required to keep the place going, especially at the end, whenever they hiring freeze and people were seeing it, and lower seniority folks maybe jumping out before it hit, just because they could see it, they wanted to move on. Yeah, so that put a little bit bigger burden on us, and as you go through that phase in a plant of any type, there's less and less maintenance being done. So that kind of creates more and more work that has to be done.
No capital improvements were happening.
Exactly. Yeah. So, things weren't getting replaced, and we were having to do a lot more work to make the thing function.
For your fellow employees, I mean, is there something you'd like to say to all the folks out here in Central Illinois that I would say for us folks, thank you. For keeping the lights on in this area. It was a beacon all that time to, always look to the east and say, hey, something something's being developed over there. It helps me keep my house and my family warm at night and powers all the TVs and everything that goes on with it. Because when you just think about it, it's like running water at this point. You just expect it to be there. And when it's not, your whole world goes into chaos. And I want to thank you folks for fighting that fight and keeping the power on for all of us here over that time. If for you, I mean, you're not their spokesman, but I'm asking you to be in a way for your fellow employees. Anything you'd like to say to the listenership here in Central Illinois?
To my former fellow coworkers and all the folks that came before us and maybe was retired by now. I mean, I enjoyed my time there. I'm sure they enjoyed theirs. It's like any other job, while you're doing it, you're maybe cussing it a little bit, but, complaining and what have you. But no, I mean, what a great group of guys, from both sides of the fence. I say that, management, hourly versus salary, union, everybody always tried to get along, work together, came together, find solutions that was best for everyone.
Yeah. And it's a shame. It really is. That's the thing I would say about it the most is it's just a shame that it had to shut down. As you said, lots of factors went in, environmental markets, the world changed, whatever. I mean, as time goes by, I had a chance. It was really on a whim. We were headed east to do something else. We happened to be driving by and you said, hey, let's drive in there. We'll pull to the parking lot where you couldn't go before. And it turned out into a full blown tour, which I was, us and some of our friends, there was about 8 of us that day. Mm-hmm. It was all approved by the company. You guys were taking families through in the last couple of weeks there, letting them all see it as you said, depowered it. And this is what we'll post some of those pictures on Facebook. So it'll be out there as kind of a record to go along with our conversation here today. I want to thank you for that. I want to thank the folks there at the plant that allowed us to do that. Something I've been looking at from a distance forever. To actually be inside the place was a real treat that day. It really was. I don't know. It's just a shame. It's got such a huge impact on Montgomery County in particular. I think I read in one of the local papers, Journal News or something like that, it had like almost a $2 million hit to the local economy just in taxes. But I mean, just the economic impact that it created with 90 jobs and everything else. It's got to be be huge, right?
A few years ago, Dynegy did a study, had somebody come in and do a study, whatever they do. I think they said it had almost $400 million economic impact to not only Montgomery County. You draw a big circle around it. You cover Macoupin, Bond, Fayette, wherever. Yeah, that $2 million in direct property taxes, I think that was like the latest ones because they had just got them reduced. I mean, just a few years ago, they were power plant was paying over $4 million.
Oh, really?
Close to $5 million. Like I said, I'm not an expert in that field, but that's
not asking you to be, but this is stuff. This is stuff that you really want to know. You can go look it up. Yeah. But we're just talking here on this morning. Wow. Well, that's it. I mean, the story kind of start to finish of the Coffeen Power Plant, not each and everything that happened along the way. Don, anything we didn't talk about that maybe you want to throw out there about the place, interesting, or about the people?
No, I mean, I enjoyed that tour that you guys came through. We were going to Casey, Illinois.
That's right. Yeah.
KZ, however you say it.
Casey.
To see the biggest things in
the world, yeah.
In the world.
The biggest small town in the country.
Yeah. So that was just another stop. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
Well, you know what? I'll say this, and this is more about you, the person. I've known you for, God, I don't know, 30 years. Mm-hmm. We go back that long. As we followed you around the plant that day, you were like a proud papa. Here's this, and you'll get a kick out of that. And see this, look in there. You can still feel the heat coming out of that. And it's been shut down for 2 weeks. And every little nook, every little cranny of that place, every little staircase, you were proud to work there.
Oh, yeah.
And I felt that. We all felt that. And after we left, we were in separate cars that day. I told the car with the friends that we were with, I was like, I feel so bad for him because I've never seen him. I shouldn't say I've never seen you. The way you were that day, I thought, man, this is just a huge blow to what he is. To see you in your element there was really awesome.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And that's over, and time turn the chapter in life and move on.
So what are you doing now? You are moving on. Tell me kind of a nice little ending. If this were a movie, there'd be the little credits at the end and said, after the plant closed, Don went and...
Well, I'm looking at different prospects for employment here. Got a couple of irons in the fire.
And you're going to still be here in Mount Olive, I think.
Yep, I wasn't interested in moving out of state. That's where most of the other plants are, but yeah.
And you're still going to be the fire chief as long as we'll have you, right?
As long as the folks will let me serve them.
And that's a whole story for another day, but not today. Don, you have fun here on the What's That Like podcast? I got to thank you. You're not only you're one of my best friends, you're also one of the guys that also make sure that everybody else listens. You were a big proponent of the show.
Oh yeah, I love this show. I promoted it over at the power plant, try to get some of those folks listening to you. I'll send out this link too.
I'm sure
to a lot of my former coworkers.
Yeah, what was what union were you all in?
International Union Operating Engineers.
So then, you'll kick it out to all those folks. You guys are still getting kind of together, or you're trying to, right?
Yeah, well, they have a retirees breakfast the first Tuesday of every month over there at the Hillsboro Moose Lodge, and now we're all considered retirees.
so attendance has grown, right?
Yeah, I was able to attend this month, and it was pretty nice. And we've got a couple other things. We had some employee funds. We're going to have a big get-together here coming up next Saturday, and plan on probably doing that annually. I mean, I spoke earlier that I worked for Owens, Illinois, and Godfrey, and that plant shut down in 07. We still get together at least every year. Somebody say, hey, let's all meet at the Bullhaven on Sunday or whatever day.
Yeah.
And big group of people show up, and it's good to maintain those relationships.
Well, Don, thanks for coming on the What's That Like podcast. Long-time listener, first-time guest.
First-time guest, that's right.
All right, buddy, take care.
Okay, thanks, John.
All right, you heard it. I think you can hear it in Don's voice, the story and what it meant to him. And the story I told in the podcast about him giving us a tour was just phenomenal. You could just see how proud he was of what he worked there, and it made me so sad as my friend that he was no longer going to be there. And he's got some good prospects. Hopefully he's going to be employed soon. But if you're out there listening and of a job, let's get these guys hired. They were all great workers. It's not their fault that their careers ended there. They're still good employees. They were there a long time. Put yourself in their shoes, and if you can help them out, please do. All great people, I'm sure, and do your best to help some of these folks, continue to be on their feet with a good job, good paying job. They're hard to come by here in Central Illinois, and it's just a shame that the power plant did have to close. But that's it for this show. Once again, we got one more show for the decade coming up. If you've got those ideas, let me know. Let me know what they might be for the biggest things, the biggest impacts, the biggest stories, the news, the sports teams, the sports people, the events, all those things that you think have made a big impact on Central Illinois. Could be good or bad. In the last 10 years. And my friend and Mr. 5-time guest of the What's That Like podcast, Zach Weigel, and potentially some other special guests. We'll have that to you out by the end of the year as a end of the decade show for the What's That Like podcast. That's it. See you next time. Peace out.
What's That Like is available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Search for What's That Like. Subscribe today and never miss an episode. Streaming is available at SoundCloud.com and on the SoundCloud app. Follow What's That Like at Facebook.com/What's That Like Podcast and on Twitter at What's That Like Pod. All opinions of the guests of the What's That Like podcast are their own, not necessarily the views of the host or the podcast producers. We hope you enjoy this podcast serving Central Illinois and beyond. Peace out!